Alright, we're going to talk about the new 7 FCP click adjust seating die. What does it do different than the Wilson blanks or the Wilson dies? So, pull this 7 FCP cartridge out. First thing is it's got our seating stem, which, as you can see, datums all the way up basically to the ogive of the bullet, to where the standard or the VLD Wilson stem is more about there. So this is datuming right there where it's seating. We're just going to touch the lands, which is the most important, right? We don't care what the nose of that bullet reference is for. Okay, now what else have we got? So that's solid nitrided stem. We've got 2 set screws that lock the stem in. You may ask yourself, why 2 rather than 1? Well, what happens on one set screw, which has happened to me while loading a night before a match, can become loose and then your stem can move. And the reason that is because this pushes a force and a pressure this way, which gives the perpendicular direction can have clearance, and with that clearance this can end up wiggling loose. So you take the clearance out of both directions and then it can't wiggle loose. These screws are stainless nylon tipped screws, so they won't damage the thread. Okay, next you'll notice here we have 25 thousandths per revolution rather than 50 thousandths like on a normal Wilson seater. That's because we have a thread that's twice as fine. Another thing you'll notice is the clicks. Each click is 1/1000th of an inch. Something else that's different even than the old Sinclair seaters. When you pull this apart, if you guys know, when you pull the Sinclair one apart, these springs and balls would shoot everywhere, and I think there's 5 of them in there. So you see here, these are retained in these poppets that are both 90 degrees from each other. Serrations machined inside of the stainless cap, 40 pitch thread. That's how we get our 25 thousandths per revolution. And you can see we get our clicks. So I'm going to show you another feature here. So you can see we've designed it to where when you insert, that's the 7 FCP touching the lands with our reamer. Let's start to see where we get our clearance at. Right about there, to get started, right? Okay, so let's say you found your lands, and my lands are where I just randomly set this die for demonstration. So now we have a 0 stop. So if you look here, there's a line there and a set screw. So you can take this, say, okay, my 0 is right there. There's my lands. Well, you can't just lock it there, right? Because you got to be able to crank this down and to get a jump, unless you're jamming and then you're going to come this way, which I don't recommend. Okay, so now that you've found your lands, I want to know exactly where this 0 stop is. So we have this precision modified 50 thousandths shim. Take this, rotate that 0 where you want, right? So it's like an adjustable turret now, like it's on your scope, because the 0 never lines up correctly on the Wilson dies unless you spend a bunch of time adjusting the coarse adjustment up here. Okay, so now that's 0. That's touching. Okay, you want 3 thousandths jump. There's 3 thousandths. I want 12 thousandths. 17. You see each click is exactly 1/1000th. Okay, so we know that's 25 thousandths jump. And probably the maximum you're ever going to do would be 50. And you can see that's where that locks up. And that's because this shim is 50 thousandths. So that's always been one problem, you know, especially with seating depth changes or different bullets or whatever. You're like, man, where's my land touching at? Then you got to seat a cartridge and then go measure it with your comparator. This way, you can always come back and say, okay, I know I got to be on 0. Take that, boom. That's 50 thousandths, that's 2 revolutions. So I run everything at like 3 to 5 off, it seems to be. So right there's 3, there's 5. You can click it, it's always going to line up. So these are fully billet machined and then reamed with the chamber reamer also. So it's the exact shape and size of your chamber in your rifle. We have 2 set screws here on the click adjust. You don't really need it. These detents and balls are pretty tight. As you can see how much my fingers are moving, you can see how much force it takes. I mean, you gotta want to turn it. This being in your shooting bag or whatever, rolling around, it's not gonna turn it. Really don't need those, but they're there in case you do want to lock that down. So you can always come back to where your 0 is based on that 0 stop. And you can rotate that where you need it to be, as well as it makes it a lot nicer holding on to. Doesn't want to slip out of your hands when you're in your arbor press. So as you can see, that's our new click adjust fully billet FCP die. We're going to make these for probably 284 and all its variants, common variants also, Shaheen. So yeah, that's the new click adjust 7 FCP die.